An Astrologer's Day and Other Stories by R.K. Narayan. The Tiger's Claw. The man-eater's dark career was ended. The men who had laid it low were the heroes of the day. They were garlanded with chrysanthemum flowers and seated on the arch of the highest bullock cart, and were paraded in the streets, immediately followed by another bullock-drawn open cart, on which their trophy lay with glazed eyes, overflowing the cart on every side, his tail trailing the dust. The village suspended all the normal activity for the day. Men, women, and children thronged the highways, pressing on with the procession, excitedly talking about the tiger. The tiger had held a reign of terror for nearly 5 years in the villages that gird Mempi forests. We watched fascinated this scene, drifting along with the crowd, till the talkative man patted us from behind and cried, "Lost in wonder? If you've had your eye full of that carcass, come aside and listen to me." After the crowd surged past us, he sat us on a rock mount under a margosa tree and began his tale. "I was once camping in Kopal, the most obscure of all the villages that lie scattered about the Mempi region. You might wonder what I was doing in that desolate corner of the earth. I'll tell you. You remember I've often spoken to you about my work as an agent of Soil Fertilizer Company? It was the most miserable period of my life. 25 days in the month I had to be on the road, visiting nooks and corners of the country and popularizing the stuff. One such journey brought me onto the village Kopal. It was not really a village, but just a clearing with about 40 houses and 2 streets hemmed in by the jungle on all sides. The place was dingy and depressing. Why our company should have sought to reach a place like this for their stuff, I cannot understand. They would not have known of its existence, but for the fact that it was on the railway. Yes, actually on the railway. Some obscure branch line passed through this village, though most trains did not stop here. Its center of civilization was its railway station, presided over by a porter in blue and an old station master, a wizened man wearing a green turban and with red and green flags always tucked under his arms. Let me tell you about the station. It was not a building, but an old railway carriage, which, having served its term of life, was deprived of its wheels and planted beside the railway lines. It had 1 or 2 windows through which the station master issued tickets and spoke to those occasional passengers who turned up in this wilderness. A convolvulus creeper was strained over its entrance. No better use could be found for an X-carriage. One November morning, a mixed train put me down at this station and puffed away into the forest. The station master, with the flags under his arm, became excited on seeing me. He had seen so few travelers arriving that it gave him no end of pleasure to see a new face. He appointed himself my host immediately and took me into the X compartment and seated me on a stool. He said, "Excuse me, I'll get off these papers in a minute." He scrawled over some brown sheets and put them away and rose. He locked up the station and took me to his home, a very tiny stone building consisting of just 1 room, a kitchen, and a backyard. The station master lived here with his wife and 7 children. He fed me. I changed. He sent the porter along with me to the village, which was nearly a mile off in the interior. I gathered about me the peasants of those 40 houses and lectured to them from the payole of the headman's house. They listened to me patiently, received the samples and my elaborate directions for their use, and went away to their respective occupations with cynical comments among themselves regarding my ideas of manuring. I packed up and started back for the station master's house at dusk, my throat smarting and my own words ringing in my ears. Though a couple of trains were now passing, the only stopping train would be at 5:30 on the following morning. After dinner, at the station master's house. I felt the time had come for me to leave. It would be indelicate to stay on when the entire family was waiting to spread their beds in the hall. I said I would sleep on the platform till my train arrived. No, no, these are very bad parts. Not like your town. Full of tigers, the station master said. He let me as a special concession sleep in the station. A heavy table, a chair, and a stool occupied most of the space in the compartment. I pushed them aside and made a little space for myself in a corner. I had at least 8 hours before me. I laid myself down. All kinds of humming and rustling sounds came through the still night, and telegraph poles and night insects hummed, and bamboo bushes creaked. I got up, bolted the little station door, and lay down, feeling forlorn. It became very warm, and I couldn't sleep. I got up again, opened the door slightly to let in a little air, placed the chair across the door, and went back to my bed. I fell asleep and dreamt. I was standing on the crest of a hill and watching the valley below under a pale moonlight. Far off, a line of cat-like creatures was moving across the slope, half shadows, and I stood looking at them admiringly, for they marched on with great elegance. I was so much lost in this vision that I hadn't noticed that they had moved up and come by a winding path right behind me. I turned and saw that they were not cat-like in size, but full-grown tigers. I made a dash to the only available shelter, the station room. At this point, the dream ended as the chair barricading the door came hurtling through and fell on me. I opened my eyes and saw at the door a tiger pushing himself in. It was a muddled moment for me, not being sure whether the dream was continuing or whether I was awake. I at first thought it was my friend, the station master, who was coming in, but my dream had fully prepared my mind. I saw the thing clearly against the starlit sky, tail wagging, growling, and above all, his terrible eyes gleaming through the dark. I understood that the fertilizer company would have to manage without my lectures from the following day. The tiger himself was rather startled by the noise of the chair and stood hesitating. He saw me quite clearly in my corner, and he seemed to be telling himself, "My dinner's there ready, but let me first know what this clattering noise is about." Somehow, wild animals are less afraid of human beings than they are of pieces of furniture like chairs and tables. I have seen circus men managing a whole menagerie with nothing more than a chair. God gives us such recollections in order to save us at the critical moments. But as the tiger stood observing me and watching the chair, I put out my hands and with desperate strength drew the table towards me, and also the stool. I sat with my back to the corner. The table wedged in nicely with the corner. I sat under it, and the stool walled up another side. While I dragged the table down, a lot of things fell off it: a table lamp, a long knife, and pins. From my shelter, I peeped at the tiger, who was also watching me with interest. Evidently, he didn't like his meal to be so completely shut out of sight. So he cautiously advanced a step or two, making a sort of rumbling noise at his throat, which seemed to shake up the little station house. My end was nearing. I really pitied the woman whose lot it was to have become my wife. I held up the chair like a shield and flourished it, and the tiger hesitated and fell back a step or two. Now once again, we spent some time watching for each other's movements. I held my breath and waited. The tiger stood there fiercely waving its tail, which sometimes struck the side walls and sent forth a thud. He suddenly crouched down without taking his eyes off me and scratched the floor with his claws. "He's sharpening it for me," I told myself. The little shack had already acquired the smell of a zoo. It made me sick. The tiger kept scratching the floor with his forepaws. It was the most hideous sound you could think of. All of a sudden, he sprang up and flung his entire weight on this lot of furniture. I thought it'd be reduced to matchwood, but fortunately, our railways have a lot of foresight and choose the heaviest timber for their furniture. That saved me. The tiger could do nothing more than perch himself on the roof of the table and hang down his paws. He tried to strike me down, but I parried with the chair and stool. The table rocked under him. I felt smothered. I could feel his breath on me. He sat completely covering the top and went on shooting his paws in my direction. He would have scooped portions of me out for his use, but fortunately I sat right in the center, a hair's breadth out of his reach on any side. He made vicious sounds and wriggled over my head. He could have knocked the chair to one side and dragged me out if he had come down, but somehow the sight of the chair seemed to worry him for a time. He preferred to be out of its reach. This battle went on for a while. I cannot say how long. Time had come to a dead stop in my world. He jumped down and walked about the table looking for a gap. I rattled the chair a couple of times, but very soon it lost all its terror for him. He patted the chair and found that it was inoffensive. At this discovery, he tried to hurl it aside, but I was too quick for him. I swiftly drew it towards me and wedged it tight into the arch of the table, and the stool protected me on another side. I was more or less in a stockade made of the legs of furniture. He sat up on his haunch in front of me, wondering how best to get at me. Now the chair, table, and stool had formed a solid block with me at their heart, and they could withstand all his tricks. He scrutinized my arrangement with great interest, espied a gap, and thrust his paw in. It dangled in my eyes, with the curved claws opening out towards me. I felt very angry at the sight of it. Why should I allow the offensive to be developed all in his own way? I felt very indignant. The long knife from the station master's table was lying nearby. I picked it up and drove it in. He withdrew his paw, maddened by pain. He jumped up and nearly brought down the room, and then tried to crack to bits the entire stockade. He did not succeed. He once again thrust his paw in. I employed the long knife to good purpose and cut off a digit with the claw on it. It was a fight to a finish between him and me. He returned again and again to the charge, and I cut out, let me confess, 3 claws before I had done with him. I had become as bloodthirsty as he. Those claws, mounted on gold, are hanging around the necks of my 3 daughters. You can come and see them if you like some time. At about 5 in the morning, the station master and the porter arrived and innocently walked in. The moment they stepped in, the tiger left me and turned on them. They both ran at top speed. The station master flew back to his house and shut the door. The porter, on fleet foot, went up a tree, with the tiger halfway up behind him. Thus, they stopped, staring at each other, till the goods train lumbered in after 5:30. It hissed and whistled and belched fire, till the tiger took himself down and bolted across the lines into the jungle. He did not visit these parts again, though one was constantly hearing of his ravages. I did not meet him again till a few moments ago when I saw him riding in that bullock cart. I instantly recognized him by his right forepaw, where 3 toes and claws are missing. You seem to be so much lost in admiration for those people who met the tiger at their own convenience, with a gun and company, that I thought you might give a little credit to a fellow who has faced the same animal alone, barehanded. Hence this narration. When the talkative man left us, we moved on to the square, where they were keeping the trophy in view, and hero worshipping and feting the hunters, who were awaiting a lorry from the town. We pushed through the crowd and begged to be shown the right forepaw of the tiger. Somebody lowered a gas lamp. Yes, 3 toes were missing, and a black, deep scar marked the spot. The man who cut it off must have driven his knife with the power of a hammer. To a question, the hunters replied, "Can't say how it happens. We've met a few instances like this. It's said that some forest tribes, if they catch a tiger cub, cut off its claws for some talisman and let it go. They do not usually kill cubs." The end.